Hello there, I'm Leo Warder for Kit Guru, and this laptop is the PC Specialist Octane II. The two bits of hardware you're most interested in inside it are the Skylake Core i5 processor and the NVIDIA GTX 970M graphics. Obviously that is gaming hardware. Let me just get GTA 5 running just to demonstrate. It does play games as you'd expect. The screen is a full HD panel, 15.6 on the diagonal, which is a very conventional mid-range size. The chassis is not especially thin and light. It's 3.4 kilos and 35.7 mil thick. So in that respect, it is physically a very average laptop. The hardware, however, is interesting. I'll come to that in some detail in a bit. Right, the benchmark's running and you can see that all playing nicely. Because this Clevo chassis can be configured in a great many different ways. There is a range of processors, a choice of GTX 970 or GTX 980M graphics, a bunch of different memory, and you can go through storage drives galore because it's got two 2.5-inch bays and two M.2 slots. So potentially you could have up to 4 drives in the thing. The one thing you cannot do with the chassis is you cannot put an optical drive in it. Let me just bring in the Kit Guru microphone. I'll stick that just here, just so you can actually hear how quiet this laptop is. The vents are on the back. It does actually eject a certain amount of hot air. There are no vents on the side, purely on the back, and I'll show you inside it shortly. And that sort of whooshing noise is about as loud as it gets. And the reason for that is that it doesn't actually get very hot. There is very little hot air to shift, therefore the fans don't need to go to any speed, therefore it's very quiet. It's an elegant piece of engineering. But as I say, we're talking Core i5 Skylake and GTX 970M, obviously where you'd have a more grunty processor and more grunty graphics, then the situation may be different. I can't speak for that, I haven't seen that. Anyway, just to rattle through the basics, so Core i5 6600, 16 gig of HyperX Impact RAM from Kingston, that's in dual channel, GTX 970M graphics, with how much memory? I think it's 6 gig of memory, yes, 6 gig GDDR5 on those graphics. The panel 15.6 inch, one of the options actually is to have a 3K display, which obviously bumps up the price a tad. And this has the 120 gigabyte HyperX Savage SSD from Kingston, which uses a Phison controller, and a 1 terabyte Hitachi hard drive as backup storage. The two M.2 slots are vacant. Also of some interest is that the networking hardware is by Killer. Wireless AC 1535 and Killer Ethernet. Now I'm going to do some sort of more an in-depth look at the Killer hardware. It's actually, you may think of it as coming from Atheros. Actually these days the company's been spun off separately and it's now Rivet Networks. What I can say is the network connection in this laptop very good. But then I wouldn't say the Intel hardware is too shoddy. So I'm going to look more closely at the Killer side of things, but as things stand, good. Incidentally, the wireless card is actually under the keyboard. You have to basically pull the chassis to pieces to get to that, unless there's some subtle way of lifting the keyboard that I completely missed. But once I turn to the back of this laptop, you'll see that there is plenty of access to many other components. The 3K option of the screen, by the way, is 2880 by 1560, and that'll cost another £59. If you buy the most basic version of this Clevo chassis with hardware from PC Specialist, it'll cost you £1,160. This version is £1,300, so relatively speaking, only slightly more. The basic model has a Core i5 6400, 4 gig of memory in dual channel, and a hard drive, no SSD. So bumping up to single channel memory, so bumping up to dual channel memory and adding an SSD and a slightly faster processor makes a lot of sense. If you completely max the thing out with a 3K display, a Core i7 32GB DDR4, GTX 980M, a pair of 960GB SSDs in the 2.5 bays, and a pair of 512GB SSDs in the M.2s, i.e. really go to town, and that'd be 3TB SSD storage, the price could go as high as £2,700. So the range is £1,160 for the basic, £1,300 for this, or go all the way absolutely mental to town, £2,700, which is quite a range. Okay, that's all finished and that's lovely. And as you saw, that played beautifully. The figures for GTA 5 on this average 52 frames per second, minimum 17, although the minimum's a bit harsh because you get momentary drops in GTA 5. In practice, it's going to be better than that. Now, I have got the quality settings ramped right up, which for GTX 970M is a little bit on the harsh side of things, but that's what I did anyway. If you turn them down a tad, you'll get better frame rates. That's just all there is to it. Power brick is quite beefy. It is rated at 230 watts there, but then that presumably is the same power brick you get regardless whether you have a Core i5, Core i7, GTX 970M, GTX 980M. So it is overspecified for this laptop without a shadow of doubt. Let's just turn that off and shut that down, and we'll just rattle through the ports and connectors. And that's off. Touchpad, very nice, multi-touch, fingerprint reader, keyboard is perfectly acceptable, all very nice. Styling is actually a little bit on the plain side of things. The coating is sort of rubbery, but hasn't attracted fingerprints horribly as some of these rubbery coatings do, so that's quite good. It does sort of attract dust a little bit, but I like the coating. The styling is very much understated, and that's no bad thing. It is the precise opposite of having a shiny glossy finish and lots of greasy marks and a shiny screen. So in that sense, good work. Ports and connectors. We have got two USB 3s there. We've got a Type-C USB 3.1 and the killer Ethernet as mentioned. We have an eSATA, which is a bit of a curiosity, and we've got a card reader there. On the front we have got a light. On this side we've got USB 3 and headset jacks, and on the rear we've got a whole mass of connectors for graphics. So that's the power connector there. We've got two display ports, we've got one HDMI, and then we've got the vents for the heat. That there is the battery. This cover covers the storage side of things. So we've got two 2.5s here. That is the Kingston SSD. That's the Hitachi hard drive. So that's easy peasy to get in and out of. There's an M.2 there. And if I take off this cover, there's about 3 screws and 4 screws respectively for these covers. They're dead easy to remove. And then we've got the cooling side of things. Curious to note the two fans, there's a subtle difference between the two of them. Heat pipes, so CPU and GPU as you'd expect, very flat, and then memory goes there. So, and there's the other M.2 there. So one M.2 there, one M.2 there. So access to all the major components with the exception of the Wi-Fi card, which as I said is slightly hidden away, dead easy. Absolutely solidly built chassis. One thing I did note when I was going through the Clevo manual, and that was a fun thing to read, is that if you have an Intel K-series CPU, this is not K-series, obviously K means overclocked, you can overclock it using Intel Extreme Tuning utility. If you run that utility, it adds apparently a CPU overclocking button to the Control Center Gaming Utility, which must be a Clevo bit of software. As far as I can see, that's not on this laptop. That software also has a GPU overclocking button. So if you want to start investigating the GPU side of things, it implies there is scope for overclocking it. I didn't, because as far as I can see, this laptop is very much built to be quiet. It does a competent job and it's built to be quiet. It doesn't generate a lot of heat. Those graphics, the speed starts at 405 megahertz, under load rises to 540. Temperature rise is absolutely trivial, as this laptop is so cool and so quiet. It is an absolute joy. How it would behave if it had the GTX 980M, I can't begin to consider. But, you know, that's essentially a whole different thing. And as I've mentioned before, with a couple of other laptops we've seen recently, that Type-C USB 3.1 Thunderbolt super speed, whatever port there, that's good. that port is going to become something to really treasure in years to come as we see more peripherals that use it, such as external SSDs and monitors and such like. And it runs Windows 10 as you'd expect. So overall, this laptop is very competent. It looks dull, but it is undeniably competent at gaming. I love the options you have for storage. The fact that today M.2 SSD is quite expensive, it's going to drop in price over time. There'll come a time when you want to have more storage to laptop, bang in a drive there, and it doesn't seem quite right to call them drives, but there we go, or bang in a drive there and you're good. There's also a slot for a SIM. You can, if you go through PC Specialist, buy yourself a 3G card, £29, a 4G card, £59, right down the bottom of my notes. They do them by Huawei. So if you wanted to add mobile on the go to this, you could, or of course you can do as we all do, which is just tether the thing to your mobile phone. But you do have the option. So the looks of this chassis implies it might be businessy. The hardware is actually far more gamey, but the permutations you can get with the Core i5 or Core i7, the memory, the multiple drive bays, and actually the choice of either a Full HD or a 3K display panel, you've actually got a stack of options with this particular chassis, which is thoroughly interesting. And the system I've actually got here is definitely down at the cheaper end of the scale. £1,300 for this laptop is an absolute steal, and I am deeply impressed by Octane II. So this is Leo Walder for Kit Guru. This is PC Specialist Octane II.